Welcome to the podcast, guys, and welcome, Ralph. How are you feeling today, Ralph?
I'm really good. Thanks very much. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for being on the show. And are you able to provide a bit of context into your life? Maybe the audience at home want to know who you are as a person. Are you able to take us down a bit of a journey and share with us your life?
Absolutely. I am born and raised in the Chicagoland area here in the U.S. That's where I am right now. Currently, I'm what's come to be called location independent. Simply means I don't have a permanent home. And for the most part, when we're not in a pandemic, I'm traveling about 9 months of the year internationally, organizing and leading my tours around the world. And so, not being able to travel as much as I have been full time for the past 13 or so years is a little bit disconcerting, as you can imagine.
Yeah.
For someone who makes their living from travel. But I've almost always been in my own business, for about 35 years now that I've, my professional life. And so I've almost always worked for myself, except for a 3-year stint where I worked for marketing director for a division of a Fortune 500 company. And unfortunately, that was probably the worst 3 years of my life at that time.
Yeah.
So I like to be able to just sort of count on myself and be able to just not have to count on anyone else, to be honest. So
Absolutely. And your life is quite interesting because you mentioned location independent. So that's effectively that enables you to work from anywhere. Is that right? Yeah. And I'm guessing that was an intentional setup. You've obviously put a bit of thought behind that. Yeah. And
yeah.
yeah.
So I've been location independent. So I've been doing this business full time for about 13 years, organizing and leading tours around the world and being a professional travel photographer, teaching photography on the road. But about 7 or 8 years ago, I went location independent. I was living in Southern California at the time in one of the most expensive zip codes in the world. And I was there 3 months out of the year total. And so I was leading these tours 9 months out of the year. And so finally dawned on me, why am I paying rent 12 months when I'm there so sporadically? And so that's when I chose to do what's today called minimizing, or becoming a minimalist. I don't know if that was even a term back then, probably. But I just did it because it made sense. So got rid of 80-90% of my stuff, which that's all it was. And sort of moved back in with family, or put that other 10 to 20% in the basement, and now come and go as I please. And so kind of got ahead of this pandemic inadvertently, because I've always been someone that's kind of worked from where my laptop was, or at least for the past 13 years. And so pretty used to doing that. And it's a really nice thing. And it's interesting to see how many people are, just learning what that actually is nowadays.
It's amazing, the world now, the ability to work from any location. And I guess I want to touch on your traveling experience, because you seem like a well-seasoned traveler. And what are the most memorable destinations that you've traveled to?
Yeah, each one, of course, has its own memorable parts, but I guess there are certain ones that stick out. And one is Cambodia. It's
Okay.
a place that I hadn't really spent too much time considering going to, but I was with a friend of mine in another place on another trip, and we're talking about, well, where can we go next? Because we were having so much fun. He says, I've been to Cambodia at least 10 or 12 times. You got to make it one of your next destinations. And so I said, all right, I'm committing right now, here now, to do that. And so I don't know, 6-7 months later, we had a trip together to go down there with another friend, and I absolutely fell in love with it.
Yeah.
And Cambodia is a little bit off. it's not really off the beaten path, but it's not at the top of a lot of people's lists. But it's absolutely fantastic for every reason. The people are some of the nicest in the world. The food is incredible. The historical sites and the landscapes and just everything. The hotels are wonderful, really, really nice boutique hotels, clean, every amenity you can think of, and very reasonably priced destination by most standards. And so it just kind of has everything. And the photo opportunities are off the charts, the history. So Cambodia is very high on that list, as is the Republic of Georgia, which is a new destination that I've been going to for about 2 years now, and really fell in love with Georgia. And that's for those who aren't really familiar with it or where it might be, but it's in the Caucasus and like near Armenia, east of Turkey on the Black Sea, butts up against Russia, was a former Russian satellite. So another place with food that's out of this world. And Tbilisi, the capital, has that wonderful contrast between very, very modern type architecture and buildings and amenities, but with a very long history as well. I believe the Tbilisi was founded in the year 458. So it's been around for a while. And so you see a lot of that old architecture. Again, the food is just simply out of this world. And they have amazing culture. From what I understand, the oldest wine culture in the world, something like 8,000 years old. So really great wines.
Wow.
Just another wonderful place.
All right, guys. So that's one to put on the bucket list. So Tbilisi and Cambodia. And actually, I was fortunate enough to escape to Vietnam right before the lockdown began. So, and I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe Vietnam and Cambodia are pretty close to each other.
Yep, they butt up
And
against each other.
yeah,
Yep.
and yeah, the one thing that stood out to me was just the cultural differences. I'm from Melbourne, Australia, and going to Vietnam, just the people, even the homeless people or just the people in the street, are willing to say hello to you and willing to help you out, willing to help out a stranger, and that's the one thing that really struck me, because living in a Western society, I mean, you see it. People are nice, but there's a different level of niceness, I guess, to put it in those terms. Yeah.
No, absolutely. And Vietnam's a wonderful country. I also do trips there. As we mentioned, it's right next to Cambodia, right on that. Is that considered that peninsula there in Indochina? It makes up Indochina. And so what I love about Vietnam is it's a very modern as far as business goes. There's a lot, it's very prosperous. And although I've only been going there for maybe 6-7 years now, I can see what I'm sure is a change for anyone who's been there maybe 15-20 years ago. There's people are dressing very modern. They're going out for expensive coffees, let's say, and meals out.
Yeah.
Which, there you go. Which are not expensive by our Western standards, but I could just tell that they're even though I hadn't been there 20 years ago, I could tell that there's probably been this shift in prosperity, and so I like to see that. But yet you still have this incredible history, and I like Cambodia just a little bit better, only because to me it's like Vietnam probably was 15-20 years ago.
Right.
But they're both just wonderful countries with amazing food, of course.
Yeah, absolutely. And in your entire experience traveling, can you tell us any outlandish stories or any outlandish experiences that you've been through where you thought, wow, what is going on here? I'm sure you would have been in some crazy times.
It's funny, but I I'm not sure if I'm just lucky or what, but I've, knock on wood, never been in a, really precarious position. Although now that I just come to think of
Uh-oh.
it, uh, I was almost kidnapped in Mexico City. I almost forgot about that. I was actually
Just
living
casually.
there. Yeah. I was actually living there in Mexico City, getting my master's in international business, so an MIBA. I was about 29, 30 years old. And so it's a long story. I don't want to get into it too much,
Sure.
but I was kind of uh, muscled by four policemen, said they were policemen, into the back of an unmarked car. They flashed
Jeez.
some badges at me, wouldn't let me see them again so that I could kind of verify that they really were police. So I have a feeling that they really weren't. And they took me to my ATM and made me clear out all my cash that I had, which at the time was about $400 worth. And then they came to my apartment and they cleaned me out there. So I guess I hope they weren't really police, but that was not a great position to be in. And it seemed a lot worse after it happened, to be honest with you. While it's happening, I was more pissed off than anything, and didn't realize how, upside down it really could have gone, just with any little thing that changed the situation. So I was very lucky.
Jeez, that's a unpleasant experience to go through. And shifting into something a little bit more positive, what is some advice that you could give to someone if, for example, they want to start traveling the world? I guess you need to put together a plan, but in your experience, what's the best way to go about doing this?
Yeah, I tend to go to places and arrange tours. As again, I organize and lead tours that are small groups. But people often ask, why do you go to these specific places? And they're usually places that I want to go, that I have an interest in. And I'm a fairly normal person, so if I have an interest, I've got to think that other people do as well, and they're not too crazy or off the beaten path. But so obviously figure out what's a place that you've always wanted to go to, what's interests you. A lot of people have bucket lists and things nowadays, but so figuring out where that is, what the best time of year to go is, and that's not always the high season. For me, it's almost never the high season to go, because that's usually when it's more expensive, more crowded, things like that. Oftentimes hotter in places like Europe. For me, I like to go in that shoulder season, spring and fall, whatever hemisphere you're in, and you just get cooler weather, less crowds. Things are less expensive. You get a little bit more of a sort of a locals experience, I'll call it. And so planning, it's great if you can be spontaneous and just say, you know what, I'm going to look online, and there's websites that will tell you where the cheap flights are this week. And if you can jump on something like that pretty quick and just go, I admire you.
Yeah.
I never seem to have that luxury of doing that, but I also am a planner, so I like to know where I'm going. I'm a little bit older nowadays, so when I was younger, it was I'll show up and find a place when I get there. And now it's like, I want to know that I've got a place that I'm going to be sleeping the first couple nights, where it's going to be, what it's like. And so I will do that research. So it just depends what kind of traveler you are, what your budget is, where you want to go, what kind of experiences you want to have. But one of the main tips I could give you is to hire a local guide. Hire
Right. Okay.
someone in the place that, especially that first day or two, that can take you out for an orientation walk, introduce you to the highlights, um, a little bit of the language, depending on where you are, the food. And that'll, number one, make you feel a lot more comfortable than, experiencing it the rest of the time on your own, maybe. but it can be very inexpensive to do that. So sometimes we think that that must be expensive to hire a guide, but depending on where you go, you can hire a guide, sometimes including a car that might, maybe they'll take you outside of the city or maybe even from city to city. And, um, you're almost surely going to have to pay for any expenses like hotel and things like that. But for a car, you can sometimes get a guide. And there are licensed guides and non-licensed guides, and there's pros and cons to that as well. I prefer the licensed guides for sure, but and that could be $50 to $75, including the driver, who is usually the guide themselves. But hire a local guide. You'll feel so much more comfortable. You'll get that history and a little overview of the place, and then you'll feel a lot more comfortable tackling it on your own for the rest of the time that you're there.
Okay. Cool. And thanks for sharing that. And I want to touch into your background into photography. And I thought I'd throw a curveball at you, and I'm going to ask you a trivia question. Do you know who invented the digital camera?
Digital camera. Well, I mean, I think it was the folks at Kodak. I don't know who though. Maybe I'm wrong. What's the answer?
You're right about Kodak. It was a Kodak engineer, Steve Sassoon. So
Okay.
I thought I'd throw in a bit of a curveball there. So
Yeah. Good one.
So what are some tips for taking a good photo? I know it's a pretty broad question, but I'm happy to hear your answer.
Yeah, well, Patrick Symes, he's a photographer, says if you don't like getting up early, then be a writer.
All right.
And I love that saying because what it means is the better light is early in the morning, and it can be later in the evening when the sun's low in the sky and you've got a not much nicer light than typically when we go on vacation. It's like, well, I'm going to sleep in, I'm on vacation, and and that's great. It depends, maybe you work really hard and that's the kind of vacation you're after. That's great. But typically for me, I want to get out early because I want to get the good light. I want to beat the tourist crowds, get out before the heat of the day, get out before the pickpockets are out, because there's no other tourists out and the pickpockets are sleeping. They're out in those big crowds, and that's when they thrive. So if you get out early, it's just going to be you and the local kids in their school uniforms on the way to school, and the parents taking them or on their way to work. Those are the people that I want to see. It's going to be in good light, cool weather. And so and then you come back and take what I call a photographer siesta. And, when the light's terrible and the sun's high in the sky and you got really harsh light, go back to the room because you got up early, take a nap, and go out in the afternoon when the light's better again. So photography, the word photography means to paint with light, roughly. And so the light is so important. It's the number one thing when it comes to photography. So the more you can put that in your favor, the better your shots are going to be. The other tip I'll give is that oftentimes people don't look at the background. And so we're photographing a person or a thing or whatever it is, and you don't realize, and I've done it myself, you come home and you're looking at your computer and the images, and you realize that the proverbial telephone pole's coming out of the person's head, or someone's walking through the scene that you don't necessarily want. And so that's about looking deeper into the scene to see what's going on behind and in front of your subject that may be affecting it, and maybe affecting the overall scene. And that's such a simple thing that, sorry about that. That's such a simple thing that anyone can do, and it will make your photography so much better. So anyone can get out early with any kind of camera, because I'm not a big, you got to have a certain kind of camera at all. Smartphone is just fine. I'm shooting a lot more with my smartphone today than I used to. And being aware of your backgrounds and foregrounds and how they're affecting your subject or the scene. Moving around the subject so that that background, if you've got a stable subject, I'm looking at this microphone right now, and as I move around, that background is changing, and I'm blocking things I don't want, and I'm revealing things I do want by moving around that subject.
Yeah.
So that to me are just three very simple tips that anyone can use with any kind of camera.
Okay. Okay. And because this is a self-development podcast, I am curious, how has photography, do you feel like you have developed yourself, not the film, developed yourself as a person, or your character as a person? Do you feel like you have changed in the past 5 or 10 years due to photography, or yeah?
Absolutely. And the reason that I think of right off the bat is that at the beginning, when I started doing this professionally and leading the tours and bringing groups around the world, I was less interested and less bold about photographing people. And that was probably because I was somewhat intimidated, like most people are, because that's one of the number one questions I get is, how do you photograph people? And it is easy, but it's not easy sometimes to approach people, to feel comfortable photographing that person, the one, someone in a market or on the street or whatever. But it's like anything else, the more you do it, the better you'll become at it, the easier it will become for you. So for me, it's photography has made me a little bit bolder, and I've never gotten into trouble or had an altercation with someone because of photographing them. However, one time I was shooting the travel and cultural images for a cookbook on Mexican cuisine, and we did the 35-day assignment. And actually, my two partners on it were from Melbourne. And it was an Australian
Oh,
cookbook. It was an Australian publisher doing a cookbook on Mexico.
yeah.
And they, so, so it was a 35-day assignment, and we were traveling all over the country. So we went to Chiapas, Mexico at one point, and I was photographing in a market this woman's tomatoes, this pile of tomatoes at her stall. And she got so upset that she picked up a tomato and threatened to throw it at me because I was taking pictures of her tomatoes. And it
Jeez.
wasn't even, yeah, not even her or anything, not a person or anything, but it was, for some reason, she got upset that I wanted to photograph this pile of tomatoes.
That must have
But
been prize-winning tomatoes, or something. Jeez. It.
apparently,
Did you say that was in Spain? Sorry, or
no,
where
no,
was?
that's Chiapas, Mexico.
In Mexico. Sorry. Yeah. Okay. Well, I know the Mexicans are proud boxers, so yeah, I guess maybe
I lucked out. Could have been worse.
it could have been worse. Yeah. All right. Well, I want to kind of shift into your personal work, your photography. I've got what I'm going to do. I'm just going to share my screen because I've got some images of yours that maybe you could provide some bit more context, and yeah, just maybe the audience are curious to see them. So, uh,
Sure. This hasn't been set up, so I didn't know you were going to do this, but that's all right.
all right, has that come up on your side there?
Yeah, sure, I can see it.
Yep, cool. So this is a beautiful shot, and this is in the Sahara Desert. What is there any more context or any? Guess it's
Yeah, I've got a pretty good story about this, although it's not this exact image, but I bring groups to Morocco. And one thing that we do is we do an early morning camel ride in the desert. And it's called the Erg Chebi, as I forget what that stands for, like the big dune or something. I apologize. But I'm sitting on this camel that when I took this shot. And I actually, I've done this 7 or 8 times. So I entered one of a similar shot into a travel photography contest. And so I explain it. So I'm sitting on this camel with my iPhone, and I'm leaning off to one side, trying not to fall off the camel, holding
Yeah.
on with one hand and trying to take an iPhone photo. This is definitely an iPhone shot.
This is
And so I'm
iPhone.
trying to,
Wow. Okay.
oh yeah, because I recommend that my people don't take their big cameras on the camels because it could be dangerous. They get dust in them.
Sure. Yeah.
It's more about safety.
Yeah.
So I'm 99% sure this is an iPhone shot.
Yeah.
But so what I'm doing, the reason I'm leaning off to one side is because I want to get separation between the camel's head and the man there. Because as I'm sitting on the camel, you can imagine they're overlapped. As I move, that's that perspective that I was talking about changing. So I'm getting separation between the camel's head and the man. So, that just came out real nice. I like the background. The man's, he's a little bit tight on that part of the dune that's coming right across the top of his head there, but it's not coming through his head, and there is a little separation there. But the dunes themselves, the ripples in the sand, it just, really nice photo opportunity.
Yeah, absolutely. I've got another image as well. This one. This is a beautiful image.
Yeah, this one, another iPhone shot, I believe, that I took in LaGuardia, Spain. And that's actually our hotel straight ahead. And it had just rained a little bit. And so the ground was wet and reflective. So I'm always looking for reflections. Sometimes people that I'm with, or probably even that I'm not with, think I'm a little bit crazy, because if I see a puddle, I'll walk around it and I'll be looking at it and moving up and down, changing that perspective, because it's really fun to get a really cool reflection in a puddle and to photograph something unexpectedly. Like, because everyone's getting those postcard shots. But if you can just do something a little bit different to change your perspective, get it in a reflection, anything to make it a little bit different, that's probably going to be a good thing. So this is just in the old town of LaGuardia, Spain. And again, that's our hotel straight ahead, which actually was a former private home that they've converted into a wonderful boutique hotel that we stay at on my northern Spain's Basque Country. And
A home. Wow. Okay.
Former, like it's obviously a pretty nice home.
Yeah.
A big villa.
All right. I've got one more picture.
Oh yeah. This is Porto, and I talk about reflections, but I also love shadows. And so, when you're out at noon, you're not going to get many shadows because the sun's straight above and the shadows are going to be really short. But we're out early this morning and the sun's coming from the right in this image, and you could see the reflection or the shadow of the bridge on the Dodo River there. And I do like this. I believe this man is sculling, but he's on a one-man boat, and it gives that little, what I call a human touch, adding a human touch to the shot that gives some sense of scale, perspective, and I think makes the viewer put themselves into the image as well. What's that guy doing there? How would he get there? I want to be there.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And there's not a cloud in the sky as well. It's a great shot.
Well, and to me, that's the major negative of this shot, is that there are no clouds. Yeah, I love clouds. And if you look through my Instagram feed, which these are from, it's unusual for me to post an image with no clouds, but I think it was more about the shadow, the man. But I love clouds because in the shot, it's about a third of the sky is the image and it's just blank.
Yeah.
So to me, that's not a good thing. So something that could make the shot better is if it had really nice puffy clouds.
Yeah. Well, thanks for sharing that. And I want to touch on your application. So And the only I'm curious because maybe one day I might develop my own application, but I'm just curious to hear your experience. You've actually developed an app in the iOS marketplace. Do you want to run us through the experience that you've?
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, that I did about 11 years ago, 11, 12 years ago now. I think it was 2010. Probably started in 2009. But I have a book out, and it's a friend of mine was starting to create some apps, and he said, "Would you be interested in turning the book into an app?" And the book was more like 101 photo tips. And I think it's a good book, but I didn't really foresee, I couldn't, really see it being an interesting app. So I said, I don't think that would be a great idea, but I have this other idea of creating a shot list. And a shot list is just that. It's a list of the kinds of shots that you should be aware of when you're in a place. That would be my next tip about photography, is to come back with a really nice, well-rounded set of images that tells the story of the place. And there's architecture photographers, people photographers, food photographers, but travel photographers need to be pretty good at all those different genres or types of photography if you want to tell the story.
Yeah.
I don't want to come back with just portraits of people or just plates of food. I want to come back with a vast variety of images that tells the complete story and really gives the viewers of my photography an idea of what it was like to be there. And so that was the idea behind the app, which is called My Shot Lists for Travel. And it's available only on iOS. But so he liked that idea, and I ended up working with him and a woman who was a developer, and he ended up bowing out for whatever reason, and she and I just worked on it. So she did all the developing, the coding, everything, but every other decision, photograph, any wording, verbiage in it was all mine. And she just kind of took my vision and put it into an app, because I don't know how to do that.
Yeah.
So yeah, that process was really, it's a fairly simple app. It's got 52 pictures in it. Each picture has one or two sentences sort of explaining the idea behind that category. So landscapes, interiors, night scenes, recreation, etc. But the idea of a shot list before the app was just to give you a framework for the types of images you should be looking for. And that idea has been around since the dawn of photography, but I wanted to put it in your pocket. And so we did that, and I think it came out really nice. We had one update to it, but she and I ended up parting ways, and I've just sort of let it sit there on the App Store. I made it go free. We were charging 99 cents when people were still doing that. I don't think there's a lot of apps out there still charging 99 cents for them. But I think at that time, around 2009 and 10, there might have been 300,000 or 400,000 apps on the App Store, which seemed like a lot then. I can't imagine how many millions there must be today.
Oh, there's heat. Yeah, it's a very competitive landscape at the
Yeah.
moment. Yeah.
Yeah, and still it was very competitive back then. And to come up with something that was fairly unique and that you had to explain to people, and so it did pretty well. And then I ended up, it wasn't selling great, so I'm like, I just want it to go free because I want people to just use it. I'm not concerned about the 99 cents. I want people to use this concept. And so we updated it, and I put all new images and updated the verbiage, and now it's out there. There's been a couple little glitches in it because of the iOS updates that aren't playing well with the code in the app that's now, even after the update, probably 6 or 7 years old.
Yeah.
So people might find a few little glitches in there, but I may someday update it to the point where I completely refurbish it or do something all new to it. But I don't have the time or interest in
Yeah.
even updating the code to to get it right. It's just a lot of work. And people ask about, why isn't it on Android? And that just doubles the effort. And it's hard enough to make it for iOS, let alone for both.
Yeah, sounds like the
But
boats sailed on that idea a little
I
bit.
think,
Yeah.
I mean, I think it's still very useful, and I use it and I recommend it to people. But yeah, as far as updating it, I don't think that's something I'm going to do.
Sure. Cool. Thanks for sharing that experience. And so I guess in this current pandemic, these Corona times, I guess it's really restricted travel as a whole, and you must be feeling the pinch as well. So I guess, how have you been able to stay proactive in these times, and what have you been doing with your time now in the lockdown?
Yeah, I mean, going as hard as I was for 10 or 12 years, traveling like that 9 months out of the year, it's definitely a dream job, but it's physically very challenging to be on planes, trains, and automobiles, and moving around from hotel to hotel every 2 to 4 nights, flying across time zones and jet lag and all that stuff. There are negatives to travel. I love being there, wherever there is,
Yeah.
but the getting there and between is often what gets you. So I, other than the fact that there's no income because I'm not leading tours, I've actually, for the most part, enjoyed this downtime because it's allowed me to do some things that I've had on my list for a long, long time that I never had time to do, or never any kind of a window of enough time to focus on. Because when you're doing these tours, I'm working on 5 trips in advance, and that's a lot of details and a lot of just sort of bandwidth that keeps me from doing other things. So I wanted to start a YouTube channel for a long, long time.
Yeah.
I had a travel blog connected to my photoenrichment.com website, but I kind of let that go. And so I wanted to create this new brand. Number one, I did create a new travel brand called Alla Campagna Experiences. And that's a little bit less about photography and more about the cultural aspects of travel, the food and people, and things like that, staying in amazing properties like private castles and wine estates and villas, like that's one in Spain that you pointed out. And that was something that I had in mind maybe 2 years ago, so before the pandemic. But I think that's where travel's going after the pandemic, that people are going to want smaller groups, less moving around, less being in community vehicles, and more about cultural immersion and really getting to know a place more intensively than a lot of places a little bit. But back to the Continental Drifter, which was another brand that I wanted to create. And it actually started out with the idea for a TV show, which I'm still working on, but they're not making a lot of TV shows right now that are about travel. So that's had to be put on the back burner a little bit. But I started out with the travel blog at continentaldrifter.co. And then that turned into a travel YouTube channel. That's also Continental Drifter on YouTube, if you search that. And we're about 20 episodes in. And I knew it was going to be a huge commitment, which it has been. And so I'm trying to have fairly highly produced videos. A lot of the video that you'll see in it of the places, because I haven't been traveling, so it's mostly places that I've photographed and videotaped over the years. So I'm going back into those archives. Most of it, if not all of it, was done with my iPhone. And so, but so, now there's a lot of graphics and other type of motion graphics and things like that. So like anything, we can only get better the more we do it. So I'm having a really good time with it. It's been fun. I've been getting a lot of great feedback about the channel.
Yep.
about the information that I'm providing, people are, they're falling right into my trap, which is I want to inspire people to travel. I want to, that they're saying, oh man, now I got this place on my bucket list. Now you've made me want to go to that place or try this thing. And that's exactly what I'm after. So it's working. And so, inspiring people to travel and showing them these incredible experiences that I've had and the people I've met, the food I've tasted, the experience and activities that I've tried, and then hopefully inspiring them to do it on their own, or perhaps they want to come with me sometime. But it's certainly not an advertisement for my trips. It's just, a guy who's been very lucky and traveled around the world and wants to share those experiences with people.
Mm. Yeah, you touched on bucket list before, and I know everybody's bucket list will vary, but what's your top five places to go to?
Well, I never really called it a bucket list, but I certainly have places that I'm very interested in going. Colombia is very high on that list. I'd like to get there. Syria was high on my list.
Yeah, wow.
Just a few years ago. Unfortunately, that's a really sad case right now. Other places I would like to go. I want to get to Uruguay, Bolivia, so a few places in South America. I want to go to the Philippines. I will spend more time in Japan. I've only been to Tokyo for about 5 days, and that was a great experience, but I'd love to spend more time in Japan.
Wow. Okay. Cool. And I might end the conversation here, Ralph. It's been a pleasure speaking with you and your experiences. And if people want to connect with you, how can they connect with you, or is there anything you're promoting at the moment that you'd like to share?
Well, yeah, sure. Thanks. Of course, now we're recording this in February. I'm not sure when it'll come out, but this is 2021, and I'm hoping that trips for the fall of 2021 will actually happen, at least the fall in the Northern Hemisphere. Uh, that I've got trips coming up to Copper Canyon, Mexico in August, which to me is, it's funny. I say this about every trip, and I don't mean mean it, but I mean it, but maybe it sounds a little strange, but it's one of my favorite trips. It's like your children, really. And I only go to great places, so I'll say this about every trip, but Copper Canyon, Mexico, one of my favorite places.
Yeah.
Bigger and deeper than the Grand Canyon, and has one of the great train rides of the world right through it. It's the only passenger train in all of Mexico. Fantastic. And then that's followed up by a trip to northern Spain in September. Then Puglia, Italy, which is the heel of Italy. We're staying in a private agriturismo there, and just staying in one place and doing hub and spoke, getting to know it. Then we're staying at a private castle in France on my France's Magical Dordogne trip, and doing the same thing, just staying at the castle for 7 days and doing hub and spoke in the villages nearby. I've got an Armenia, Georgia trip in October, which is a fantastic time to be there. So I'm always trying to time the trip so that the weather's good, there's less crowds, maybe there's fall colors, or it's the harvest. There's something interesting about that time period. In the spring, it's maybe blooming flowers and things like that. So that's good. And then I do have an online course at Skillshare that is free. Starts with a 14-day trial. If people want to check that out, perhaps you can put that in the show notes. If anyone wants a free travel photography course from me, I really think it's a lot of valuable information, and it doesn't cost anything. So, but definitely the YouTube channel. I'd love it if people check out the YouTube channel. Give it some likes, watch the videos, comments. YouTube loves that, and I love it even more.
Yeah, speaking of YouTube, please also subscribe to this channel. I got to throw in my own little plug there. So, but look, as I said, it's been a pleasure speaking with you, Ralph. I've learned a few things, and thanks for joining me.
Oh, my pleasure. Thanks so much for having me on.
Thank you.